The millionaire CEO didn't know he had gotten his secretary pregnant with twins until everything was revealed at the company's gala party. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Anthony stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, adjusting the crisp lapel of his tuxedo with the poised air of a man who expected perfection. He surveyed the bustling room, quietly taking note of every detail, the catering staff scurrying with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres, the soft music that drifted from the quartet in the corner, and the impeccably dressed crowd waiting for the highlight of the night. It was his company's annual gala, a celebration that demanded his presence and leadership. Yet beneath his calm exterior, a faint sense of unease flickered. He spotted Ava across the room, her dark curls perfectly styled, and her elegant black dress catching more than a few admiring glances. She normally exuded a calm professionalism that inspired confidence in any boardroom, but tonight there was a look in her eyes that he couldn't quite decipher. Ava was his secretary, a pillar of efficiency and grace, yet something about her manner seemed off. She kept glancing at her phone, tension pulling at the corners of her mouth. Anthony felt a subtle twist of concern in his gut. There was no time to dwell on it, though. A handful of eager investors closed in on him, each trying to capture a moment of his attention. They asked about corporate expansions, partnerships, and rumors of new projects. He answered every question with polished charm, forcing a confident smile. His mind, however, wandered back to Ava. He couldn't recall a time she had looked so anxious. It was unlike her to slip away from the crowd. Just then, an older board member approached, leaning in to speak softly in Anthony's ear. "Media is gathering outside," he said, his tone urgent. "Might want to keep an eye on that." Anthony nodded, excused himself from the circle of investors, and scanned the room. He found Ava in the midst of an exchange with another colleague, her phone gripped tightly in her hand. She gave Anthony a fleeting, uneasy glance before turning back to the conversation. He wanted to walk over and ask if she was all right, but a sharply dressed server hurried up with a question about the placement of the champagne station. Over the next few minutes, Anthony directed the staff to rearrange a few tables and keep an extra watch for uninvited press. With each small task, he felt the pressure of the night mounting. This event was crucial, a chance to make a strong impression on shareholders who wanted reassurance that the company was poised for even greater success. Anthony was proud of how far they had come, proud enough to stage this lavish gathering, but the knot in his stomach hadn't loosened. While taking a moment to straighten a centerpiece, he glanced over to see Ava hurrying into a side corridor, phone at her ear. His eyes followed her slight form as she disappeared from view. He remembered when she first started working under him, poised, precise, and unflappable. Seeing her visibly stressed set off an alarm in his mind. He tried to shrug it off, but couldn't shake the sense that something big was brewing. Ava, meanwhile, leaned against the corridor wall as her phone call ended. The memory of the day she found out she was pregnant replayed in her mind, jarring as ever. She could still see the doctor's concerned expression, still feel the cold stir of panic and, underneath, a blossoming warmth at the thought of life growing within her. The father, of course, was Anthony, her brilliant, demanding, and at times surprisingly kind boss. She hadn't meant for it to happen. Their moment together felt distant, yet undeniably real. She squeezed her phone, unsure if revealing the news in the midst of this high-profile gala was the right choice, but keeping it hidden felt more impossible by the minute. When Ava stepped back into the main ballroom, she found herself confronted by a colleague's curious gaze. "You look a bit pale. Everything okay?" the colleague asked gently. "Yes, just a little headache," Ava answered, mustering a reassuring smile that fell short of convincing. Her co-worker gave her a searching look before drifting away into the crowd. Champagne flutes began to circulate, their crystalline chime echoing through the room. The hum of voices grew. Anthony was making his way toward a small stage at the far side of the ballroom, preparing to give a brief welcome speech. He climbed the few steps, cleared his throat, and surveyed the crowd under the glow of the spotlight. A hush fell. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice ringing with practiced confidence. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate our achievements. This year has been a triumphant one for our company." The crowd applauded politely, and Anthony's smile looked natural enough, but behind it, questions churned. Why was Ava acting so distant? He'd known her to be the most composed person in the room. Could this sense of foreboding be about nothing more than a personal matter? With a brief nod, he ended his remarks and stepped down from the stage, blending once more with the throng of guests. As he moved through the crowd, the gentle brush of small talk filled his ears. A handful of well-dressed guests whispered excitedly, speculating about the real reason the paparazzi were waiting outside. Anthony managed to keep a gracious face, but the rumors felt like tiny cracks in the evening's polished exterior. He caught sight of Ava again, standing near a table piled with elegant floral arrangements. She glanced down at her phone, and Anthony could just make out the anxious pinch of her brow. He edged toward her, only to pause when he saw an expression of resolve flicker across her face. In that same moment, an associate tugged at his sleeve, gesturing toward the entrance. Another paparazzo was apparently causing a stir. He had only a second to murmur an apology to Ava before hurrying toward the commotion. Security guards were blocking the entrance, trying to push back a determined photographer who flashed a camera. Anthony frowned. He told the guards to keep the uninvited guests off the property and to ensure that none of the paying guests felt unsafe. As security escorted the paparazzo away, Anthony forced a measured public smile, though his heart hammered. If word got out that there was tension inside, personal or otherwise, it might attract even more tabloid interest. He stepped away from the confrontation, sweeping a hand over his tie, and scanned the room for Ava. He needed to speak with her, if only for a moment, to set his mind at ease. The band struck up a livelier tune, and the crowd shifted as a few couples took to the dance floor. Anthony wove through the guests, apologizing for a momentary absence, but he couldn't spot Ava anywhere. Then, by the far side of the ballroom, he saw a door leading to a smaller corridor, seldom used except by staff. Ava slipped through it with a serious, determined look on her face. She didn't notice him watching. For a fleeting moment, Anthony wondered if he should call out her name, but something held him back. Whatever was burdening her, she was taking steps to handle it on her own, or so it seemed. His sense of unease only grew, and his thoughts raced with possibilities. He realized he had never seen Ava look so resolute yet so apprehensive at the same time. Whatever she was about to do, it felt like a turning point. That was when he realized quite starkly that the night's troubles were only beginning. Anthony sees Ava slip through a side door, her expression determined. He wonders what she's about to do. Anthony lingered at the threshold of the side corridor, pulse quickened by the sight of Ava disappearing beyond the gilded doors. The gentle hum of the gala faded the further he stepped into the quiet hallway. She stood at the far end, her back turned, shoulders tense. The corridor's soft lighting cast slender shadows along the walls, adding to the hushed, almost secretive feel of the space. When she spun around and caught sight of him, she hastily brushed the corner of her eye, as if wiping away an unwanted tear. He froze, uncertain whether to approach. Ava, usually so composed, looked vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. "Ava?" His voice was low, careful. "What's going on?" She took a quick breath, her eyes darting sideways. I'm sorry if I worried you." She tried to smile, but the effort faltered. "I just needed a moment alone." Anthony closed the distance between them. Now that they stood face to face, he noticed how pale she seemed, as if her usual self-assuredness had drained away. "You left in the middle of everything," he said, keeping his tone gentle. "I could tell something was off all night." Are you okay?" Ava hesitated, lips parted as though she wanted to spill a secret. Then, as if a switch was flipped, she gathered herself and shook her head. "I'm fine," she lied. "It's just personal stuff. This isn't the time or place." Before Anthony could press her further, the murmur of voices floated down the hallway, growing louder. A passing colleague poked his head in, eyes darting between them. "Anthony, we need you in the lounge area. An investor from overseas is threatening to leave if he doesn't get a word with you soon." Anthony gave Ava a searching look, silently promising they'd continue this conversation later. He caught a hint of relief in her eyes, as though she was saved from an imminent confession. With one last concerned nod, he turned and followed the colleague back into the heart of the gala. The lounge area was elegantly furnished with velvet sofas and marble tables, an oasis within the bustling event. A small group of key investors stood gathered near a long, sleek bar. Their faces were drawn, frustration palpable. Anthony approached with a polished smile, although tension gripped his shoulders. "Gentlemen," he said, keeping his voice firm yet amiable, "I hear there's some concern." An older man in a tailored suit cut right to the chase. "We've invested heavily in your vision, but rumors swirl that your personal life might become tabloid fodder. We need reassurance that your leadership remains strong." Anthony lifted his chin, keenly aware of the unspoken mention of the paparazzi outside. "I assure you, none of these rumors affect the stability or the future growth of our company. All expansions and strategic partnerships remain on track." The man pressed his lips together, uncertain. Another investor chimed in, "Your board must be satisfied with this. After all, perception can sway the market. Are they fully in support of your leadership, or is there friction behind the scenes?" Refusing to show any hint of nerves, Anthony replied, "The board and I share the same vision. Tonight's gala is proof we're celebrating achievements, not covering crises. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll see to it that everything runs smoothly. Your confidence means a great deal to us." With that, he offered a short nod and excused himself. As he moved away, he spotted Ava slip out of a side door leading toward the restrooms. Something in her posture tugged at him. He couldn't tell if she was steadying herself against the doorframe or simply pausing for a breath. The need to check on her flared again, but a new voice stopped him in his tracks. "Mr. Walker," a level female voice called. Anthony turned to see the company's PR advisor, a woman wearing a crisp red suit, her expression grim. "We need to talk." He stepped aside, clasping his hands behind his back. "What's on your mind?" She inhaled deeply, scanning the swirling crowd. "Word is spreading that tonight might not just be about celebrating the company. Paparazzi wouldn't be so desperate if there wasn't something big they're chasing. Whatever you do, be careful what you say in public. A single misstep, and we'll be cleaning up headlines for weeks." Anthony's jaw tensed. "I understand. I'm doing everything to keep things under control." The PR advisor offered a curt nod before stepping away. Standing alone, Anthony glanced once more toward the corridor where Ava had disappeared, then strode over to see if she was all right. Ava emerged from the ladies' room a moment later. She took a slow breath, as if trying to fortify herself. A distant memory flashed in her mind, the night that set everything in motion. She had been helping Anthony prepare for a crucial meeting, working late hours. They'd both been exhausted but elated by the progress. Their conversation shifted from the project's details to lighter, more personal topics. One shared glass of wine blurred the lines of professionalism, and a second glass drew them closer until it felt impossible to ignore the underlying chemistry. Shaken out of the memory, Ava touched her abdomen gently, still flat beneath her fitted dress, but she could feel the faintest hint of change. She couldn't help wondering if Anthony would feel relief, shock, or disappointment once she revealed her secret. Not wanting to linger on the thought, she straightened her spine and forced herself back into the gala's vibrant throng. Over by a column near the main dance floor, she nearly collided with someone calling her name. "Ava?" The voice belonged to an old friend from college, a bright-eyed woman who pulled her into a warm hug. "I haven't seen you in ages. You look amazing tonight. You're glowing." Ava froze for a split second, her heart pounding as the word glowing hung in the air. She pasted on a smile. "Oh, just keeping busy." She felt the pressure of that simple comment, worried her friend might detect the changes in her posture or expression. Her friend gestured around. "You must be so proud to see how far the company's come, and I heard you're basically running things behind the scenes." Ava forced a laugh. "That's an exaggeration, but I do my best to keep Anthony organized." She sensed a rush of heat creeping into her cheeks. Worried she might let something slip, she excused herself quickly, claiming she needed to check on an event detail. In the middle of the ballroom, Anthony was scanning the room with hawk-like focus. The weight of the evening bore down on him, the suspicious mood from the investors, the uneasy feeling regarding Ava, and the swirl of rumors that threatened his carefully curated public image. When he finally spotted Ava weaving through the guests, he noticed how tense her posture was. She looked like someone on the brink of an urgent decision. He approached, and they momentarily shared a silence heavy with words unspoken. Before he could utter a question, though, a tall man with slicked-back hair appeared at Anthony's elbow, greeting him too smoothly. Anthony recognized him as a minor executive from a competing company, someone who had been around in the past, often fishing for confidential information. "Anthony," the executive said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "I couldn't resist coming to see what all the commotion was about." Ava politely stepped aside, keeping her distance, sensing the tension. Anthony's tone hardened. "I didn't realize we invited you." "Let's say I'm always where news might break," the rival replied, tilting his head at Ava. "And I hear there's been plenty of interesting chatter." He then waved a dismissive goodbye, meandering off into the crowd. Anthony's patience wore thin. The last thing he needed was a rival poking around. He turned to Ava, ready to insist they speak privately. But before they could exchange more than a look, a board member rushed forward. "We need you to make a formal statement tonight," the man urged. "Set everyone straight, or we risk losing more than face in front of these investors." Anthony nearly cursed under his breath, but managed a curt nod. "I'll handle it. Just give me a minute, will you?" The board member clapped him on the shoulder. "Do it soon. We're at a tipping point." As the man disappeared, Anthony whirled back to Ava. "I need you to tell me what's going on," he said softly, fighting the pressing urge to raise his voice. "Whatever it is, I can't be blindsided tonight." Ava swallowed hard, an apology in her eyes. "I know. It's just, there's so much at stake. Let's talk when there's a quiet moment." But quiet moments were hard to come by. A security guard suddenly appeared by Anthony's side, murmuring about another paparazzo outside, forcing Anthony to drop everything and dash toward the entrance. Ava was left alone in a hush of swirling gowns and anxious conversations. She looked toward the stage, where glimmering lights framed the podium he had stood behind earlier. Her heart thundered as she realized she couldn't wait until the evening wound down. Every second that passed felt like it amplified the weight of her secret. She smoothed her dress, drew a fortifying breath, and started walking purposefully across the polished floor. If she kept delaying, the night would spiral entirely out of control. Anthony needed to hear it directly from her, even if it meant confronting him in the most public way possible. She paused near the stage steps, gaze sweeping the crowd. Anxiety pricked at her, but she steadied herself, recalling the moments of vulnerability they'd shared in the past, moments that bound them in ways neither could deny. A quiet resolve formed in her mind. "He needs to know now," Ava whispered, voice trembling with determination, and stepped forward. Ava stood at the edge of the makeshift platform, her eyes scanning the ballroom awash in glittering lights and murmured conversation. She could hear the gentle clink of champagne flutes and the low hum of chatter, all underscored by the soft rhythm of the live band. Her heart pounded so fiercely it felt like it might echo through the microphone she clutched with trembling fingers. The moment she'd dreaded for weeks had finally arrived, and there was no turning back. A wave of uncertainty washed over her as she glanced at the polished marble floor. Would people believe her? Would they blame her for the scandal about to unfold? She looked up, forcing her gaze to lock onto Anthony, who was still busy fending off curious guests and persuasive board members. Every step she took toward the center of the stage felt as though it reverberated in her bones. The bandleader, noticing her approach, politely paused the music. Voices began to quiet. People turned to see who had interrupted the flow of the evening. Ava inhaled, then lifted the microphone. Her voice wavered at first, but she found her courage and spoke clearly. "Good evening, everyone," she began, managing a small, apologetic smile. "I realize this is unusual, but I have something to share that can't wait." Anthony, startled by the hush, spun around to see Ava standing in the spotlight. For a moment, his mind couldn't reconcile the surreal image. She looked both vulnerable and determined, framed by gold drapes and 100 inquisitive stares. An uneasy sensation flooded his chest as he wondered what she was about to reveal. Ava swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue. "I work closely with Anthony, Mr. Walker, and for quite some time, I've kept something secret, something that affects both of us." Her voice broke slightly, and she felt the collective tension of the room tighten around her. "I'm pregnant. With twins." A stunned silence engulfed the ballroom. Every face turned toward her with shock, curiosity, or disbelief. Her words hung in the air, momentarily static, until Anthony took a reflexive step forward, nearly colliding with a server balancing a tray of champagne. His heart raced. He waited, hoping perhaps there was more, or that she'd say something to cushion the blow. But she pressed on, tears edging into her eyes. "And Anthony, he's the father." In that split second, the buzzing of hushed conversations exploded into a roar of raised voices and gasps. Cameras flashed at the entrance as paparazzi, alerted by some tip-off, flung themselves into the commotion. The band, unsure whether to keep playing or remain silent, stopped entirely. A handful of guests clapped nervously out of pure shock, while others turned to each other in wide-eyed disbelief. Anthony forced himself to move. He navigated through the swirl of confused onlookers and joined Ava on the stage. His mind reeled, torn between astonishment, a strange sense of relief, and immediate concern for both Ava and their unborn children. The tension in the air felt electric. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, meeting her gaze. She gave him a trembling nod as if to say, "I had to." He turned to the crowd, face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and resolve. He began, but the press was already in overdrive. Several cameras pointed directly at him, shutters clicking in rapid succession. Voices overlapped in a chaotic chorus. "Mr. Walker, how long have you known? Is this an affair, or were you two in a relationship? Ava, how far along are you? Does the board know about this?" Security rushed to contain the paparazzi, urging them to step away from the stage. Anthony scanned the crowd, spotting a prominent investor glaring at him with a look of betrayal. Another investor was already on his phone, likely whispering into the receiver about the fiasco. Anthony's stomach churned. Clearing his throat, he spoke into the microphone, voice firm but tense. "Everyone, please remain calm. This is a private matter, but I want to address it carefully. This announcement, it's caught me by surprise tonight as well." He cast a quick glance at Ava, who looked both relieved to have finally spoken and terrified by the fallout. The entire room erupted in fresh clamor as they realized Anthony himself hadn't known until that very moment. Rumors, half-truths, and speculation began to ricochet across the tables. A wave of frustration swelled in him at the very public nature of the reveal, yet he knew Ava must have been under immense pressure. He needed to protect her no matter what. An older board member stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, Perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more private setting. Clearly, there is a personal component to all of this. Personal? The stock's going to drop by morning if we don't handle this properly, another voice hissed. It belonged to an influential shareholder, face flushed. Anthony, you have to reassure us that your personal life won't topple everything we've invested in. Anthony signaled the quartet to resume playing softly in an attempt to restore some semblance of normalcy. A gentle melody drifted through the air, but the tension remained palpable. Ava's face was pale. He leaned in to speak to her without the microphone. "Are you all right?" He squeezed her hand. She nodded stiffly, though her eyes brimmed with worry. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I couldn't hold it in any longer." He brushed back a stray curl from her forehead, voice tight. "We'll figure this out." Cameras continued to flash at the door, an incessant strobe that threatened to push them all over the edge. Hotel staff scrambled to keep the paparazzi from swarming inside the ballroom. The strains of the music did little to calm the sense of spectacle that had overtaken the evening. Some guests hurriedly exited, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Others circled around, drawn to the drama. The board members huddled together in hushed debate, clearly strategizing for damage control. Anthony heard fragments of their urgent conversation, phrases like corporate liability, code of conduct, and reputation crisis. In the midst of it all, Ava slipped from Anthony's side, her stomach twisting with nerves. She retreated toward a quiet corner near the stage curtains, needing a moment to breathe. Everything felt surreal. She had half expected Anthony to be furious, but instead, he'd shown genuine concern. It was almost more than she could handle. Meanwhile, Anthony attempted to address a cluster of reporters who had somehow made it past security. They thrust microphones forward with machine gun questions, their eyes alive with the scent of a breaking scandal. "Mr. Walker, how will this affect your standing as CEO? Are you stepping down? Did you knowingly conceal your involvement with an employee?" He held up a hand. "All I can say at the moment is that I accept responsibility. I ask that you respect our privacy. Any further statements will be made at a later time, once we've had a chance to—" That was as far as he got before a rising clamor of voices drowned him out. The investors near the open bar began shouting about the company's image, about how the media spin might wreck them if Anthony didn't get ahead of it immediately. Each moment that passed brought more tension, and Ava watched from her corner, feeling strangely both lighter and burdened. She had finally told the truth, but at what cost? A commotion at the entrance made them all look up. One of the top investors, a man whose hefty financial support was pivotal to the company's future, stepped inside the ballroom with a stern expression. He wasted no time cutting through the crowd to confront Anthony. His voice rang out, clear enough to be heard by everyone within earshot. "Mr. Walker," he said, eyes blazing with disapproval, "I've supported this company for years, but this scandal is poised to wreak havoc on the market's faith. Unless you take decisive action to address it, I'll have to pull my backing, effective immediately." Anthony stood rooted to the spot, words evaporating on his tongue as the investor's ultimatum bore down like a hammer, leaving him speechless and cornered. Anthony stood rooted to the spot, still reeling from the investor's ominous words. The ballroom no longer felt like the opulent venue he'd chosen for a celebration. It had turned into a battlefield of shattered expectations and looming threats. Journalists that had managed to slip past security hovered at the fringes, hungry for more drama. Guests who had once mingled with champagne flutes now whispered in tense clusters. The hush of anticipation weighed heavy on his chest. A sudden flash from a photographer's camera jarred him into action. He signaled the head of security to take more decisive measures, though the man's troubled eyes showed they were already overwhelmed. Anthony pivoted to face the investor again, summoning his composure. "I understand your concerns," he said, holding his voice steady. "But please, allow me to address this situation with the board tonight before you make any final decision." The investor tilted his chin up, still visibly displeased. "I want answers soon, not damage control after the fact, he warned. With that, he stalked off, leaving Anthony with a renewed sense of urgency. He scanned the chaotic scene until he found Ava standing near a deserted buffet table, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Although the lights caught the glossy sheen of tears in her eyes, she stood remarkably still. The confession she'd made had turned everything upside down, and the look she wore told Anthony she felt every ounce of guilt for doing it so publicly. Summoning whatever calm he had left, Anthony crossed the marble floor to her side. A hush settled around them as if the rest of the crowd had momentarily stepped back, not wanting to intrude on a conversation that was clearly personal. "Ava," he said, voice gentle but tinged with strain. "This night isn't ending the way either of us expected. We need to talk. Really talk." She nodded, gaze drifting to the floor. "I know, but with all these people here." He glanced at the nearest security guard. "Let's find a quieter space." Without waiting for a response, he guided Ava toward a side door leading to a smaller private lounge reserved for VIPs. The plush sofas and low lighting offered a semblance of comfort, though the tension followed them inside. Anthony closed the door, muffling the distant din of frantic guests and tabloids. Turning to Ava, he studied the lines of worry etched on her face. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then exhaled in a tremulous breath. "I don't know. I'm relieved that the secret is finally out, but seeing the chaos..." She trailed off, eyes glimmering with tears she fought to hold back. "I'm afraid I ruined everything for you." He took a cautious step closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said firmly, "we both have a part in this. I wish I'd known sooner, but there's no going back now." He let out a shaky sigh. "The board is calling an emergency session tonight. They won't wait, not after that threat from our investor. We need to control this narrative, and quickly." She nodded. "I want to help, but I'm also terrified about my future. About the twins." In the silence that followed, a faint knock sounded at the door. A staff member poked their head in, apologizing for the intrusion. "Sir, the board wants to meet you in the conference suite. The press is becoming aggressive in the main lobby, and we've managed to keep them from barging in, but we can't hold them off indefinitely." "Understood," Anthony replied, mind already calculating what needed to be done. He turned back to Ava. "Go home for now, please. You shouldn't be in the middle of this. I'll talk to you later tonight, or first thing in the morning." Ava's initial reaction was to protest, but one look at his determined expression told her it wasn't a mere suggestion. "Okay," she whispered, resigning herself to the necessity. "Just let me know what happens." He brushed a thumb over her knuckles briefly, then stepped away to gather himself for the battle he was about to face. Outside, the lights seemed harsher, the angles of the decor suddenly cold. Security guided them both to a side hallway. In hushed voices, they explained that paparazzi lurked around every possible exit, waiting for a chance to snap a revealing photo or hurl provocative questions. Ava tugged at the hem of her dress, nerves taut. She tried her best to slip away quietly, escorted by two guards who ushered her toward a car waiting near the loading dock at the back of the hotel. Anthony, meanwhile, straightened his jacket and made his way to the conference suite on the top floor, ignoring the pointed stares of staff and guests. The elevator ride felt interminable. His own reflection glared back at him from the mirrored walls, looking far from the poised CEO he'd been at the start of the evening. When the doors slid open, he entered a hushed corridor leading to double doors, behind which the board members were already convened. Their voices seeped through the threshold, tense, urgent, punctuated by an undercurrent of fear. He pushed the doors open. Around a long mahogany table sat half a dozen directors in formal attire, looking grim as they typed furiously on laptops or shot messages on their phones. At the head of the table stood the chairman, an older man with silver hair and a perpetual air of sternness. He nodded curtly when Anthony walked in. "Well, Anthony," began the chairman, closing a portfolio of documents, "I imagine you know why we're here." Anthony forced himself to keep his voice even. Yes, we have a crisis on our hands. The news is already spreading and we risk losing a major investor if we don't act. One board member, a middle-aged woman who rarely spoke unless she felt strongly, leaned forward. Let's not mince words. The rumor is that you fathered twins with your secretary and apparently you didn't even know. This is unorthodox to say the least. Perception matters. Clients might see this as scandalous. Our stock could waver. Anthony stiffened. I understand how it looks, but let's set the record straight. This is a personal matter, not a reflection of my professional conduct. I plan to accept responsibility and handle it. My only request is that we don't let speculation run rampant. A man in a charcoal suit slammed a folder onto the table. Speculation is already rampant. The press is feasting on this. Next, they'll start digging for dirt on you, on her, or anything that can create headlines. The question is how we distance the company from your choices and reassure investors. Anthony felt a surge of anger, though he fought to maintain composure. Ava is not just my secretary. She's an integral part of this company, and I never intended for this to turn into a public scandal. But now it's here, and I'm not going to throw her under the bus. The board exchanged wary glances. They launched into back-and-forth arguments, some suggesting a disciplinary measure, others insisting on a carefully worded statement that addressed the scandal while preserving the CEO's image. Anthony stood at the center of this storm, arms crossed, refusing to budge on the idea of blaming Ava. As the debate raged, he could feel time slipping away, the possibility of the investor pulling out inching closer with every second. At one point, the chairman demanded silence. Enough. We need a short-term plan. Anthony, you'll make a statement to the press first thing in the morning, preferably on camera. Apologize for the shock, emphasize your commitment to the company's stability, and vow that this won't compromise your leadership. Anthony nodded slowly, though he knew the statement alone might not quell the uproar. What about the investor who threatened to withdraw? We've called him, the chairman replied. He wants to see decisive action to restore confidence. We'll inform him of our plan and hope it's enough. The room fell quiet, heavy with unresolved tension. Anthony ran a hand over his face, exhaustion setting in. If there's nothing else, wait, another board member said, frowning at his phone. We have a bigger issue. A rumor's circulating online about a prior business deal you made a few years back. Something about questionable ethics. We don't know the source yet. Anthony's heartbeat stuttered. He tried to recall any old skeletons that might be relevant. Let's keep each other informed. For now, focus on addressing the main scandal. I'll look into this rumor personally. The meeting wrapped up on that uneasy note. Board members filtered out, phones pressed to their ears, already strategizing for the morning. Anthony trudged to the elevator. The city lights outside the glass windows seemed strangely distant, glimmering indifferently to his personal storm. By the time he exited the building through a private garage, the night sky stretched dark overhead. Ava had already left, and he longed to call her, but he needed a moment to gather himself. He sank into the back seat of his car, telling the driver to head for home. Halfway there, his phone buzzed. He expected more frantic calls from the board, but a single message popped onto the screen from an unknown number. He opened it, eyes narrowing. It contained a single sentence. We know what you did. Pay up or watch your career burn. A chill traced down his spine. He gripped the phone until his knuckles turned white, rereading the message. The threat felt like a ticking bomb in his palm. After everything that had happened tonight, this was the last thing he needed. His breath caught in his throat, imagining the ramifications. The city lights blurred outside the window, and his mind flooded with worst-case scenarios. Whatever the sender was threatening to reveal, it had the potential to destroy him and, by extension, damage the future he wanted to provide for Ava and the babies. As the car rolled quietly through empty streets, Anthony's heart pounded with a growing sense of dread. He realized with unsettling clarity that the crisis was only just beginning. Anthony stared at his phone in the dim morning light, the screen still showing the cryptic text that had rattled him to his core the night before. His sleek black sedan idled outside his townhouse, engine purring softly. He'd barely slept. His mind had been consumed with images of flashing cameras, murmuring shareholders, and the haunting message threatening to upend his already turbulent world. Now, dawn was breaking over the city, and he had no choice but to head to the office and face the fallout. As the car pulled into traffic, he couldn't ignore the glare of the headline on the digital billboard above. CEO's secret pregnancy shocker, company in turmoil? It was accompanied by a blurry picture of Ava at the gala, microphone in hand, her face tense with emotion. He'd hoped overnight calm would cool public interest, but the headlines suggested otherwise. Already, news alerts buzzed on his phone, each notification another stab of uncertainty. By the time his driver eased into the parking garage beneath the company's headquarters, Anthony felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. Press vehicles clustered near the garage entrance, waiting for any glimpse of him or Ava. He slipped from the car, ignoring the faint calls of a journalist who'd managed to sneak inside. Security escorted him to a private elevator. Stepping out onto his executive floor, he noticed immediately that the usual hum of quiet efficiency had been replaced by a tense hush. Employees whispered in small groups, darting glances his way as he passed. He managed a curt nod, trying to project the composure of a leader in control. Ava arrived moments later, stepping through the elevator doors with her head slightly bowed. Cameras had trailed her too, but building security had shielded her from the worst of it. The tension of sleepless hours showed in the faint shadows beneath her eyes. Though she tried to maintain her usual poise, Anthony caught a flicker of exhaustion every time she blinked. They rode the elevator together to his office in silence. The few people who joined them quickly grew uncomfortable under the thick aura of scrutiny, quietly disembarking at other floors. By the time the doors slid open onto the CEO's private suite, only Anthony and Ava remained. He guided her inside, gently shutting the door on the outside chatter. "You all right?" he asked, voice tight with worry. She managed a nod, though her expression looked far from steady. "I'm fine, just tired. My head's been spinning since last night." They crossed to his desk, where a neat stack of morning reports waited. Tucked in among them, however, was a thin manila folder labeled with no name, just the word confidential. Anthony's brow furrowed as he reached for it, dread coiling in his stomach. He flipped the cover open to find pages referencing a business deal from years ago, one that had ended in messy legal entanglements he thought had been fully resolved. Notes scrawled in red ink highlighted potential improprieties and hinted at questionable tactics, none of which he recalled approving. Ava hovered beside him, reading over his shoulder. "What is this?" "Something from my past that someone wants to use against me," he answered quietly, shutting the folder. "The timing can't be a coincidence. First that text last night, now this." Before they could discuss it further, the door flew open and 3 members of the board walked in unannounced. Their faces were grim. One, a man with salt and pepper hair, started without preamble. "Anthony, the stock took a hit at the opening bell. We're down 8% already." A stern-faced woman in a tailored suit cut in, eyes flicking to Ava and back. "The press is having a field day, and now rumors of a resurrected scandal are making investors skittish. We need to contain this, immediately." Anthony fought the urge to snap at them for barging into his office. Instead, he forced a measured tone. "I'm aware of the situation. I'll address it. Let's schedule a call with our top investors in the next hour." They exchanged uneasy looks, but eventually nodded. The group turned to leave, though the man with salt and pepper hair paused to fire a pointed look at Ava. She returned his gaze calmly, refusing to show any sign of intimidation. Once they were gone, she let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry this is all happening at once. I never meant for my news to coincide with whatever this blackmail is." Anthony rubbed his temples. "We'll deal with it. We just have to be smart about it." A sudden wave of nausea rippled across Ava's features. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, closing her eyes for a moment. Anthony reached out, concerned, but she waved him off lightly. "I'm fine," she insisted. "Just the stress." They had no time to dwell on it. A senior investor burst in next, seething with frustration. "Walker, do you realize how close we are to losing major clients over this fiasco? Their confidence is plummeting." Anthony straightened. "I've been setting up calls all morning. We'll reassure them." "That won't be enough if the media keeps hammering on your personal scandal," the man snapped. "Contain it, or we're out." Tension sizzled. Ava stood back, wanting to defend Anthony but not wishing to worsen the confrontation. Anthony spoke in a low, calm voice. "I'm doing everything possible. Now, if you'll excuse us, I have important business to handle." Grumbling under his breath, the investor stormed out. The hallway beyond remained a hotbed of frantic activity, phones ringing, footsteps echoing. The entire building felt ready to buckle under the weight of rumors. Suddenly, Ava's face went pale. She stumbled, reaching for the edge of the desk. Anthony darted forward, catching her by the arm. "Hey, easy. Are you okay?" A deep breath shuddered through her. I just felt dizzy for a second. Probably didn't eat enough this morning." He led her to a chair. "You need rest, Ava. Let me get you some water." Before he could move, a representative from HR appeared at the door, face tense with sympathy. She addressed Ava gently. "We're concerned about your well-being. Maybe it's best if you take some time off. We can arrange a leave for you." Ava's reaction was immediate, a fierce shake of her head. "No, I'm not stepping away now. I have to stay and do my job. This company's under enough strain without me abandoning my post." The HR rep pressed her lips together, clearly torn. "We respect that, but please, consider your health." With a nod in Anthony's direction, she departed, leaving Ava to gather herself in the chair. Anthony knelt beside her. "I won't force you, but you're pushing yourself too hard." Her eyes, bright with unshed tears, locked on his. "If I leave now, it'll look like I'm running. Or worse, that I'm expendable." He didn't argue. He understood her pride, her determination to prove she was more than just a scandal. Just then, his phone buzzed. The unknown number appeared again, delivering a single, threatening sentence. "The clock is ticking. Pay up, or watch it all crumble." His stomach lurched. Before he could respond, an old friend strode into the office, a man with sharp features and the confident air of someone used to negotiating tough deals. He was Anthony's longtime legal advisor. Spotting Ava, he nodded politely, then turned to Anthony. "I heard what's happening," the friend said, voice low. "You need a strategy. If someone's blackmailing you, we can't just ignore it." Anthony handed him the phone, letting him read the text. The friend frowned. "It might be wise to address the skeletons in your closet before they drag you under. If you go public on your own terms, the blackmailer loses leverage." Ava, silent so far, spoke up. "Couldn't that make things worse? If he comes out with more lies, or if the media twists the story?" Anthony rose, pocketing his phone. "It's risky, but so is doing nothing. Let's handle one crisis at a time. First, calm our investors. Then, we'll figure out how to handle whoever's behind these messages." He took a shaky breath and glanced at the clock. Afternoon had slipped into late day before they knew it, phone calls and urgent emails piling up. Every corner of the company buzzed with tension, rumors surging through the building. Ava tried her best to keep up, but worry for her unborn twins weighed heavily on her every step. At last, she took a moment to step away from the chaos, seeking a quiet spot in a small break room. She hadn't been gone long when Anthony sensed something was wrong. A strange hush seemed to settle over the corridor. He excused himself from yet another crisis call and hurried in the direction Ava had gone. He found her leaning against a countertop, face contorted in pain. "Ava?" he called, heart pounding. She didn't respond right away, both hands pressed to her abdomen. Then she let out a shaky gasp, Fear slammed into him like a train. "Hold on," he murmured, rushing to support her, his voice trembling with alarm. Her breathing was ragged, and the color drained from her face. Somewhere behind them, an assistant rushed off to grab help. Anthony cupped Ava's cheek, voice thick with worry. "It's going to be okay. Just breathe." As he said the words, he realized how powerless he felt. The swirl of corporate drama vanished, replaced by a singular terror for the woman he'd never intended to fall for, and for the two lives resting in her body. Late in the day, Ava experiences a painful cramp. Anthony rushes to her side, panic twisting his face as they realize the pregnancy might be in danger. Anthony cradled Ava in his arms, guiding her down the hallway with hurried steps, hardly aware of the startled employees who paused in their work to stare. Her face had gone pale, lips set in a tight line to mask the pain. The cramp that seized her felt more severe than the usual twinges she'd blamed on anxiety or fatigue. A light sheen of sweat broke across her brow. "Get help," Anthony called to a nearby assistant, voice almost breaking. "Now." Moments later, an office medic arrived, a woman with serious eyes and a medical kit slung over her shoulder. She quickly took Ava's pulse, asked her a few questions, then looked at Anthony. "She needs a hospital assessment. We can't be sure what's going on until she sees a specialist." A sense of dread coiled inside him. He sent for his driver, and within minutes, they had Ava bundled into the back seat of a company SUV. Anthony slid in beside her, ignoring the paparazzi who had tracked them to the garage and were snapping pictures through the tinted windows. All he could focus on was Ava's breathing, shallow and labored, as she clutched his hand. Arriving at the hospital, they found a handful of photographers camped outside the emergency entrance, primed to capture any new drama. Security personnel quickly shielded Ava and Anthony from the blinding flashes. A sharp voice in the crowd shouted, "Is this about the twins?" The question slammed into Anthony, reminding him that this wasn't just about corporate fallout anymore. It was about protecting Ava and the lives she carried. Inside the emergency department, the bright overhead lights felt harsh and unfeeling. Nurses hurried them into a private room. Machines beeped softly as a doctor arrived to examine Ava, speaking in a gentle but firm tone. Anthony remained by her side, tension radiating off him, prepared to handle any barrage of information the medical team hurled his way. They ran quick tests, stabilizing Ava as best they could. She squeezed Anthony's hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so drained. He bent down, brushing the back of her hand with his thumb. "It's all right," he murmured, though fear gnawed at his insides. A nurse adjusted the bed's incline and arranged the IV drip with professional efficiency. "The doctor will have more specifics soon," she reassured, "but for now, she needs to stay calm." Staying calm proved to be no easy feat. The hospital's hallway buzzed with tension. A security guard informed Anthony that some reporters were already lurking in the waiting area, trying to charm their way through. Anthony's phone vibrated incessantly with calls from board members, anxious about the company's plummeting stock and the fresh wave of gossip swirling online. He stepped out into the corridor for a moment, answering a call from a frantic director. "Yes, I'm at the hospital," Anthony said tersely. "I can't join any meeting right now. My priority is making sure Ava's okay. I'll address the public when I have something concrete to say." The board member's reply was full of worry, hints about negative press and rumors that shareholders were losing faith by the hour. Anthony ground his teeth, cutting the call short. He glanced back into the room where Ava lay, eyes closed, an exhausted cast to her features. The weight of her condition was far heavier than any corporate meltdown. He re-entered quietly. Ava looked up, forcing a small smile. "Any updates from the office?" she asked weakly. "Nothing that matters more than your health," he replied, stepping closer to her bed. "I'm not leaving you here alone." Her expression softened into something uncertain. "You really don't have to do that. I know what the board's like. They might call a meeting to push you aside or force your resignation." He shrugged, trying to look unbothered. They'll do what they have to do. I have bigger things to worry about." He reached for her hand again, swallowing hard as he recalled the vow he'd made to ensure she and the babies remained safe, no matter the cost. A short while later, a doctor with a name tag reading Dr. Morris entered the room. He carried a clipboard and maintained a calm, confident bearing. Ava and Anthony turned their full attention to him, tension humming in the air. Dr. Morris explained that initial results suggested Ava was experiencing acute stress that could worsen her condition. "We're not seeing anything dire at this moment," he said carefully, "but stress during pregnancy can lead to complications, especially with twins." Anthony glanced at Ava, heart twisting at the guilt etched on her face. She gave a slight nod. I'll try to rest more," she promised softly. The doctor left with assurances that a more detailed set of tests would clarify things soon. For the moment, Ava needed monitoring and less anxiety. Anthony sank into a chair at her bedside. He realized how different his priorities felt from just a short time ago. The company, the scandal, the blackmail, they all still loomed, but Ava's well-being overshadowed them. Through the small window of the hospital room, he could see paparazzi lights flickering in the distance. Even in a place meant for healing, they found no real refuge. Paparazzi and gossip mongers wanted a glimpse, a soundbite, anything to fuel the headlines. Anthony ran a hand over his face, exhaustion tugging at every muscle. Late that evening, after hours of tension and worry, Ava dozed off. Anthony's phone lit up once more, a call from an unknown number. He stepped into the hallway, swallowing his irritation as he answered. A clipped, quiet voice sounded. "You should have dealt with this by now. The board is stirring up questions about your leadership, and the blackmail threat. Don't forget that." Anthony felt a surge of anger. "Who is this?" he demanded, voice low. A soft, almost mocking chuckle. "Someone who knows you can't juggle every problem at once. Make a choice. Protect your reputation or watch everything crash down." The line clicked dead. Anthony's blood pounded in his ears. He told himself not to let fear consume him. Right now, he had to remain calm for Ava's sake. A moment later, a tap on his shoulder made him jump. He spun around to see a familiar figure, an ambitious rival from another firm. The man stood in the hospital corridor, arms folded, a smug look on his face. "I heard what happened. Thought I'd drop by to see how you're holding up," he drawled, though his tone suggested more of a game than genuine concern. "Leave," Anthony said coolly, stepping closer to ensure his meaning was clear. "I won't tolerate vultures hovering around Ava's hospital room." The rival narrowed his eyes. "I'm simply anticipating opportunities. If you lose your grip on the company, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." Anthony clenched his fists, straining to keep his composure. "Find someone else to bother." The rival held his gaze for a beat longer, then shrugged and strolled away, leaving behind a toxic sense of triumph. Anthony exhaled shakily, massaging the tension in his neck. This hospital, meant to be a sanctuary of healing, had turned into just another battleground in the wake of his corporate crisis. When he slipped back into Ava's room, he found her awake, glancing at him with apprehension. Her cheeks looked slightly flushed, and there was a fragile tremble in her voice. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. He paused, not sure how to begin. "Just more drama," he murmured, easing himself back into the chair. "But it's nothing for you to worry about." Her eyes roamed the IV line in her arm, the monitors that trailed quiet beeps beside her. "I hate feeling helpless," she admitted. "I can barely stand it, knowing I'm the reason the press is circling like sharks, that the board is in crisis." He took her hand, surprised by how protective he felt. "It's not just your news. They're after me too. Old scandals, rumored deals. But I'll handle it. You just need to focus on getting better." As the evening wore on, the hospital calmed, visitors thinning out. Anthony stayed by Ava's side despite the calls from board members that kept lighting up his phone. He feared leaving her alone in case her condition worsened. Just as midnight approached, a nurse stepped in. "The doctor wants a few more tests," she said gently, gesturing for Anthony to wait outside. He reluctantly let go of Ava's hand and slipped into the corridor once again. Time passed slowly as he paced, occasionally glancing out the window at the dark city skyline. At last, the doctor emerged, expression more grave this time. "Mr. Walker," Dr. Morris said quietly, "we need to talk." Anthony followed him into a small consultation room. A faint buzzing in his ears made it hard to focus on the doctor's measured words. "Ava's earlier pain subsided, but the overall stress is taking a toll," the doctor explained. "Her blood pressure and heart rate are elevated. We're worried that this level of anxiety could trigger complications for the twins." Anthony swallowed. "What do we do?" Dr. Morris met his eyes. "She needs near total rest and a drastic reduction in stress levels. If it continues like this, there's a risk to her pregnancy we can't ignore." Anthony felt the room tilt slightly. His position as CEO, the scandal, the blackmail, none of it seemed to matter in the face of that warning. "I'll do whatever it takes," he promised, voice faint. Dr. Morris patted him on the shoulder. "Let's hope it doesn't come to anything extreme." He nodded at the corridor. "You can see her now." They headed back to Ava's room. She was awake, eyes heavy with worry, but she managed a faint smile when Anthony reappeared. Before he could speak, a phone on the wall rang sharply, making them both jump. A nurse answered, then hurried over. "Dr. Morris, it's for you," she said, looking troubled. The doctor took the receiver, turning away. After listening in silence, he returned to face Ava and Anthony. "I'm afraid the test results show her condition may be worsening." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If we can't ease her stress, the twins' health is at serious risk." A chill swept over the small hospital room. Ava's gaze flicked to Anthony, her eyes brimming with fear, and he, so used to holding the reins of power, felt utterly helpless in the face of that reality. The following morning arrived with a dreary, overcast sky. Rain tapped against the hospital windows in a steady rhythm that felt like a nervous heartbeat. Anthony sat beside Ava's bed, eyes heavy from a night of restless sleep in a chair that offered little comfort. Ava still wore a pale cast to her cheeks, though her breathing had become more regular. Whenever she shifted, Anthony reached to adjust her blanket, eager to offer any small shred of relief he could. They both knew they were living on borrowed time. The doctor's warnings about the twins' precarious health echoed in Anthony's thoughts, overshadowing everything else. He leaned closer, brushing back the strands of hair clinging to Ava's forehead. "How are you feeling?" he whispered, voice hushed, as if the walls themselves were listening. "Better than last night," she replied softly. Her eyes flickered to the IV line taped to her arm and then to the monitors tracking her vitals. "Doctor said I might be able to go home if I rest completely, but the second he senses my stress spiking again—" Anthony nodded, jaw tightening. Their problems weren't going to vanish simply because Ava left the hospital. If anything, the pressure from outside threatened to escalate. He pulled his phone from his pocket, scanning the barrage of missed calls and urgent messages from board members and investors. Each subject line seemed bleaker than the last, talking about plummeting stock prices, anxious clients, even rumors that a competing CEO was making moves to capitalize on the turmoil. Ava's hand brushed his wrist. "Anthony," she said gently, "you can't hide from this forever. The board is expecting you to face them. You should go." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I know," he admitted, "but I'm afraid to leave you alone. After everything that happened—" Her thin smile offered fragile reassurance. "I'll be okay," she said, though her eyes spoke of a lingering fear for herself and the babies. "They've got me hooked up to every monitor under the sun. The minute my heart rate spikes, 6 nurses fly in here." He took her hand carefully, as if holding something delicate. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he promised. His gaze flicked toward the door, where 2 hospital security guards stood watch, courtesy of the PR team's frantic efforts to shield Ava from relentless paparazzi. True to his word, Anthony stayed just a few more minutes, pressing a gentle kiss to Ava's forehead before finally forcing himself out into the corridor. Reporters were roving like predators in the lobby. He managed to bypass them with the help of hospital staff, slipping into a service elevator that led to the parking garage. Once inside his car, he sank into the leather seat, shutting his eyes to collect himself. The driver sped toward the corporate headquarters, city streets glistening with rain. When he arrived, it was as if the entire building was on edge. An almost tangible tension hung in the air. Hushed conversations trailed off whenever he appeared, and employees darted glances at him, sympathy and speculation mingling behind their eyes. A few news vans sat parked across the street, cameras aimed at the towering facade. Up in the top-floor conference room, the board members waited. Their expressions ranged from grim to outright hostile, and as soon as Anthony crossed the threshold, someone slammed the door behind him. The drumming of rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows underscored the moment, like a warning. "Anthony," the chairman said in a clipped tone, "we've reached a critical juncture. The investors are demanding reassurance, or we risk a widespread sell-off. The press has latched onto every detail of your personal life. Our stock is tumbling, and we can't ignore calls for drastic measures." Anthony tried to project calm, though his heartbeat raced. He settled into a chair at the head of the table, crossing his hands. "I understand the gravity," he said, voice firm but quiet. "I want to reassure everyone I'm working around the clock to contain this." A stern-faced board member in a tailored Navy suit cut in. "That's not enough. The scandal alone would have been damaging, but now rumors are circling about a past business deal. Clients worry it points to a pattern of unethical behavior. Our competitor is swooping in, claiming they can offer more stability." "How do we know these rumors aren't just a smear campaign?" Anthony countered. "I've never been charged or officially accused of anything questionable." The man glared back. "Perception is reality in business, Anthony. If the public thinks there's something to the accusations, it won't matter whether they're officially proven. And let's not forget the pregnancy fiasco. You might argue it's personal, but it still reflects on the company." Raising a hand, the chairman spoke again. "Let's not rehash the entire scandal. We have a more immediate crisis. A major investor, one who's propped us up for years, has given us an ultimatum: clear this up or resign." An uneasy silence followed. Anthony's gaze swept the table. Some board members couldn't meet his eye. Others seemed to watch him warily, as if waiting for him to break. He resisted the urge to slam his fist down or shout. Instead, he inhaled slowly. "I won't resign," he said, voice measured. "Not while Ava is in the hospital because of all this turmoil. I refuse to cut and run." "If you won't step down, then find a way to silence these rumors," a slender woman in an elegant suit snapped. "That means addressing whatever skeletons might be rattling in your closet." He clenched his teeth, recalling the blackmail texts and the cryptic documents about an old deal. "I'm trying to resolve it," he insisted. "Whoever is behind this blackmail wants me to pay them off, but that would just invite more trouble. Coming clean might be better." The board members exchanged uneasy looks, and a ripple of doubt passed around the table. "You have 48 hours, the chairman finally said. "If you can't put out these fires, we'll be forced to consider removing you from your position. The future of this company is at stake." Outside, thunder rumbled softly through the gray skies. Anthony, having heard enough, rose from his seat. He left without another word, ignoring the furious whispers that ignited behind him. The hallway beyond felt suffocating, as though the building itself was turning against him. He strode to his office, where a swirl of urgent emails awaited, each subject line more dire than the last. The phone rang incessantly with queries from frantic department heads and anxious stakeholders. He tried to call Ava, only to be sent to voicemail. Panic flared briefly, but he reminded himself she was likely undergoing another test or dealing with doctors. Instead, he reached out to his legal advisor, who promptly joined him for a tense discussion in the corner of his office. "You can't handle every crisis alone," his advisor murmured. "Focus on the blackmail threat. If you can defuse that, maybe the board will back off. Any idea who might be behind it?" Anthony shook his head. "No, but it feels personal. They have details about a deal from years back. I can't imagine how they got that data unless someone in my old network sold them the story." The advisor offered a grim nod. "Then let's dig. We'll interview old associates, see who might hold a grudge. In the meantime, prepare for your next public move. A statement, perhaps?" Anthony sighed, shoulders slumping. "I can't just spit out a statement and hope it goes away. We need something definitive. The board's given me 48 hours. A knock at the door interrupted them. A junior employee peered in, face drawn. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's an urgent call. Someone claiming to have new information about your personal life. They said it can't wait." Anthony exchanged a look with his advisor. "Patch it through," he said, bracing himself. He picked up the receiver, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Hello?" A low voice, slightly distorted, responded. "You're running out of time, Walker. I'd say you have even less than 48 hours if you want to save what's left of your reputation. There's plenty more I can leak." "Who is this?" Anthony demanded. "If you're fishing for money, forget it. You've already hurt someone I care about. This ends now." A dark chuckle. "Oh, it ends when I say it ends. By the way, how's Ava doing? Stress can be deadly for twins, you know." Rage and terror mingled in Anthony's chest. "If you do anything to—" Click. The line went dead. For a moment he could only stare at the phone, breath tight with fury and dread. He slammed the receiver back into place, ignoring the wide-eyed look from his advisor. Outside his window, the rain hammered the glass, streaking the view of the city. Everything felt compressed, as though the walls were closing in. 48 hours to save his company, defend his character, and protect Ava and their unborn children from the relentless storm swirling around them. He paced, restless, considering every option from paying the blackmailer to calling a public press conference and revealing all. Before he could decide, his phone vibrated again, a new text from the unknown number. With a trembling hand, he unlocked the screen, eyes skimming over the message. Each word hammered home the bleak reality of what the blackmailer intended to release. Documents, recordings, twisted half-truths that could be devastating if made public. It was all there in black and white. Anthony's phone buzzed again. He reads a message revealing exactly what the blackmailer plans to leak. His face falls, as if he truly has no way out. Anthony burst through the door of Ava's hospital room, phone clenched in his hand like a live wire. His usually composed features were etched with desperation. Ava, propped up against a stack of pillows, startled at the sight of him rushing in. The monitors by her bed beeped in a quiet, steady rhythm, an incongruous calm against the storm brewing in his eyes. "Anthony?" she asked, trying to sound more collected than she felt. Her gaze darted to the phone in his fist. "What happened?" He drew closer, letting out a ragged breath before flipping the screen around for her to see. An anonymous website displayed a fresh headline. "Corrupt CEO hides shady past, new evidence revealed." Below the lurid banner was a photo of Anthony at some event years ago, accompanied by half-truths about a business deal that ended badly. Each paragraph dripped with insinuations of illegal activity and moral compromise. Ava's face lost its remaining color. "Oh no," she murmured, scanning the text. The details were sensationalized, but some elements matched rumors she'd heard only in passing. A possible lawsuit that had never made it to court, allegations of backroom negotiations. It all sounded far worse on the screen than Anthony had ever confessed in person. He lowered his voice, the tension in his tone impossible to hide. "They dug up every scrap of that old deal and twisted it into something monstrous. I wasn't innocent in all of it, but I never crossed the line they're implying." Ava's eyes brimmed with worry. "But you did—" Something, she managed, careful to keep her voice down. She felt a prickle of betrayal, remembering the day he'd told her once, in the vaguest terms, that he'd navigated complex negotiations when the company was just starting out. Had he truly concealed a darker side? That question pressed in on her, forming a ball of dread in her chest. Outside, the hallway quieted as staff tiptoed past. It seemed everyone in the building knew Anthony's name by now, from the tabloids, from the rumors, from the wave of media circling like sharks at every door. He pulled a chair close to the bed and slumped down, placing a hand over Ava's. His grip was warm, but trembling. "I wasn't fully honest with you," he admitted. "It wasn't a proud moment. Back then, I was desperate to make a deal to save the company. We were on the brink of collapse, and I took risks that didn't look good on paper. I cut corners, but I didn't bribe anyone, didn't break any laws. The lawsuit died because there was no real case. Yet it still looks damning if you only see half the story." She listened, breath hitching. "So, is that what the blackmailer's been threatening to release?" A wave of fresh anxiety washed over her as she pictured more headlines, more speculation, more stress. Her heart pounded, echoing in the beeping monitor. Anthony swallowed. "Yes," he confirmed. "I tried to handle it quietly, but I guess they decided to go public anyway." For a few moments, neither spoke. Ava's mind raced. If Anthony had kept these secrets, what else had he withheld? An ache formed behind her eyes, not just from the betrayal, but from the realization that the entire city was now feasting on his half-forgotten mistakes. "I understand you had your reasons," she whispered, "but I feel like I'm seeing sides of you that I never knew were there." He held her gaze. "I'm sorry. If I could rewrite the past, I would, but I can't lose you." A knock on the door interrupted him. A company attorney stepped inside, her face taut. "Mr. Walker," she said in a clipped tone, holding up a phone, "we've been trying to mitigate this fallout, but the board is in a panic. Investors are pulling out and the press is painting you as the new face of corporate greed." A faint pang of guilt flashed across Anthony's face. He rose, nodding to the lawyer. "I'll deal with it," he said stiffly, but as soon as she turned to leave, she added one more blow. "They're scheduling a public statement without you," she said, "apparently to reassure stakeholders that the company can stand on its own, regardless of your leadership." A flash of anger surged through Anthony, but he forced it down, giving the attorney a curt nod. Once they were alone again, Ava reached for his hand. "So they're acting like you're already gone." "Seems that way," he said bitterly. "They're spooked. They figure if they distance themselves from me quickly, maybe the stock won't crash." He made a frustrated sound in his throat and turned to the window. From the corner of his eye, he spotted a figure ducking past the door, camera in hand. His blood froze. Without another word, Anthony whipped the door open. In the hallway, a jittery paparazzo was snapping photos through the narrow window pane of Ava's room. "Hey!" Anthony barked, striding toward him. "Get the hell out of here! This is a hospital!" The paparazzo spun, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm just doing my job," he shot back, refusing to lower his camera. The device clicked incessantly, its bright flash striking Anthony's eyes. Anthony lunged, his fury swelling. "This is private property, and you're harassing a patient!" He reached out, ready to yank the camera away. The paparazzo stumbled back, dropping a curse under his breath. For a moment, it looked like a fight might erupt right there in the corridor, but two security officers hastened over, physically separating them. "Sir, let us handle this," one guard insisted, pushing Anthony aside. The other guard corralled the paparazzo, who loudly claimed he had every right to be there. Nurses peeked around corners, worried murmurs drifting through the halls. The tension was a powder keg, one spark away from chaos. Hospital security removed the paparazzo, but the damage was done. He'd managed to snap dozens of invasive photos. A hush fell after his departure, laced with disapproving glares from staff who recognized Anthony from the news. He stormed back into Ava's room, breath ragged, fists still clenched. Ava's eyes were wide, tears brimming at the corners. "Anthony," she whispered, voice trembling, "please, you have to stop letting them get to you. You'll only make it worse." He stood there, frustration radiating off him. Then, when he looked at her trembling form on the bed, the fight drained from his body. Slowly, he sank into the chair beside her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I just hate how they turn our lives into gossip. This stress is the last thing you need." She pressed her hand over his, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I know, but seeing you so angry, it scares me. It's like everything's spiraling out of control." He squeezed her hand in silent apology, feeling the weight of her fear. For a while, neither spoke. Eventually, he realized his phone buzzed with yet another message. Bracing himself, he glanced at the screen and found a new text from the same unknown number. It read, "Pay up now, or next time we release personal dirt on Ava. Bet you don't want that on the front page." Anthony let out a slow exhale, showing it to Ava. She read it, face going pale. "They're targeting me?" He nodded grimly. "They'll do anything to push me over the edge." Her shoulders slumped, tears threatening again. "Anthony, maybe it's time you tell the press everything. At least then they won't have anything to blackmail you with." He raked a hand through his hair, which was damp with sweat from the confrontation in the hall. "I've been considering that," he said. "If I go public with the full story, I can control the narrative, but I'll be painting a target on my back, and possibly on yours, and the baby's. It might also destroy the company if I admit to any wrongdoing." A moment of quiet passed, broken only by the steady beep of Ava's heart monitor. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to his. "And what if hiding it all destroys us anyway?" The realization stung. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers in a rare moment of tenderness. The chaos outside the room seemed to fade, leaving them in a fragile bubble of shared breath and unspoken fears. Before he could answer, a nurse tapped on the door, voice subdued. "Excuse me, Ava, you're due for another test soon. Doctor's orders. Your vitals have been fluctuating since the commotion." Ava winced, but nodded in acceptance. Anthony rose, helping her settle the blanket more securely around her. "I'll wait in the hallway," he said softly. He followed the nurse out, pacing near a small window overlooking the hospital's courtyard. Rain glistened on the plants below, the storm from earlier having passed but leaving everything damp and gray. In the hush of the corridor, he could almost think clearly, until his phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't the blackmailer. It was a call from his legal advisor. "They've scheduled a mandatory public statement for you in 2 days, the advisor said. "You'll need to decide if you're airing the skeletons in your closet or if we're going to refute everything. The board's done waiting." Anthony rubbed his face. "I need to come clean," he whispered. "I can't be held hostage by these threats anymore. But first, I have to talk to Ava about the details." The advisor hesitated. "If you admit wrongdoing in that old deal, you could face legal repercussions, not to mention a total meltdown of investor confidence." "Better that than letting these vultures pick us apart," Anthony said, voice hardening. As he ended the call, the door to Ava's room opened. The nurse peeked out, waving him in. Ava lay on the bed with tears shining at the corners of her eyes again. Concern spiked in his chest. "What's wrong?" She drew a shaky breath. "The doctor says my stress levels aren't dropping enough," she said softly. "He's worried about the twins." He moved to her side, taking her hand. "I promised I'd protect you," he murmured, feeling guilt coil in his gut. "I'm failing at that, aren't I?" She clung to his fingers, voice raw. "No, we're in this together. Just hurry. Fix this before it's too late." Before Anthony could respond, the hospital phone on the table rang, the sharp buzz cutting through the air. Ava flinched. He lifted the receiver, bracing for more bad news. Sure enough, a tense voice, her doctor, delivered a sober update. "Ava's condition has worsened," he he said. "Her blood pressure is spiking again, and we might need to consider a more aggressive course of action. If the stress doesn't ease, the twins' health is at serious risk." Anthony felt his stomach plummet. Ava caught his panicked expression, and tears welled in her eyes. Their world seemed to hang in limbo, suspended between fragile hope and a looming disaster. A gray gloom tinted the sky outside Ava's hospital window, a reflection of the tense undercurrent running through the city. Inside the room, a small TV showed footage of camera crews gathering at the company's headquarters. Reporters discussed Anthony's upcoming press conference in hushed yet urgent tones, speculating whether he planned to resign or fight back. Ava leaned heavily against her pillows, one hand resting over her belly. She felt the twins shift and kick every now and then, as if absorbing her anxiety. A nurse discreetly checked her vitals, then offered a reassuring pat on her arm. Although the cramping had subsided, her blood pressure remained stubbornly high, a fact that gnawed at her whenever she glanced at the monitors. With the nurse gone, Ava shifted her attention to the television again. She spotted Anthony's image, presumably taken from a camera feed near the entrance to the company building. He'd announced a press conference to address the swirling rumors about a past scandal. The words, "Breaking news," scrolled continuously at the bottom of the screen. She tried to calm her racing heart, reminding herself this was the right move. No more hiding, no more blackmail. Anthony had told her late last night that telling the whole truth might be his only chance to break free from the threatening grip of unknown enemies. Her phone vibrated. She reached for it, half expecting another masked threat, but instead saw a short text from Anthony. "Going live soon. Wish me luck." She typed back a simple "always" and set the phone aside, swallowing the lump in her throat. Over at the corporate tower, Anthony stood behind a podium hastily arranged in the lobby. Board members gathered in the background, some looking tense, others whispering among themselves. Soft overhead lights illuminated Anthony's face, emphasizing the dark circles beneath his eyes from too many sleepless nights. Cameras from multiple news outlets trained on him, each lens capturing the slightest shift of his expression. He cleared his throat, gripping the edges of the podium. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady but laced with strain. "I asked you here to discuss certain allegations about an old deal I made when this company was struggling. Some of what you've heard is based on real events, but it's been distorted into a sensational story." He paused, scanning the small crowd. Flashes flickered as photographers took advantage of the pause to capture every flicker of emotion on his face. "Years ago, I was desperate to save a fledgling operation. I broke no laws, but I did make ethically questionable choices. I negotiated under intense pressure and tried to shore up funding through any means within legal bounds. Some people viewed that as a betrayal of fair practice." A subdued murmur rippled through the gathering of reporters, pushing Anthony to continue. "At the time, I was confident in what I did to keep the company alive, but in hindsight, I see how it raised concerns. Tonight, I stand here to acknowledge my mistakes. I'm not proud of my tactics, and I apologize to any partners and investors who felt misled." He risked a quick glance at the board members behind him. A few stared at the floor, others watched him with inscrutable expressions. "However," he pressed on, "I have been blackmailed with the threat of leaking these half-truths. I will not be controlled by fear. I'm sharing the whole story so that nothing remains hidden or twisted for profit by people who value extortion more than honesty." Cameras clicked in rapid bursts, reporters leaning forward to catch every syllable. A tense hush smothered the lobby. Anthony exhaled, relieved he'd gotten out the confession that had weighed on his heart for so long. Then came the questions, overlapping. "Who's blackmailing you? Are you stepping down as CEO? What's the status of your relationship with the woman carrying your twins? Is it true your board has lost confidence?" Anthony tried to respond calmly, though each question cut deeper than the last. "I don't know the identity of the blackmailer yet," he admitted. I have no plans to resign at this time, but that decision isn't entirely up to me. As for my personal life, I'd ask for respect for Ava's privacy. She's in the hospital due to stress related to this situation. Our focus is on ensuring her safety and the health of the twins." Another flurry of camera flashes followed, then a final pointed query. "What if the board forces your hand?" He looked toward the group of directors clustered behind him. Most avoided his gaze. "I'm prepared to do whatever is best for this company," he said simply, "but I won't abandon my responsibilities to Ava and our children. I hope the board and I can find a path forward that balances both." From her hospital bed, Ava watched this unfold live, chest tightening as he spoke of her condition on national television. Part of her felt exposed, but another part was touched by his willingness to defend her and the twins, no matter the risks. She forced a deep breath, trying to maintain calm as her blood pressure monitor showed a slight spike. The knowledge that half the world was gawking at her private life made her heart pound, but Anthony's words ignited a small flame of hope in her chest. Not far away, back at the tower, the press conference ended. The air in the lobby crackled with tension as Anthony stepped away from the podium, ignoring shouted follow-up questions. One board member approached him, a man with thinning hair and a sharp suit. "That was either the bravest thing you've ever done or the most foolish," the man said tersely. Anthony let out a shaky breath. "It's the only way I can move forward, for the company and for Ava." The board member's stern expression softened slightly. "We received a call from an influential investor just now. He's impressed you came clean but wants to see more. We'll have to hold an emergency session, tonight or early tomorrow, to decide whether you remain as CEO." Anthony's jaw tensed. "So be it," he said. "I need to see Ava first. She's not doing well." A rustle behind him drew his attention. A small group of executives parted to reveal a tall, imposing figure. Anthony's old rival who had popped up at the hospital corridor days earlier, the same man rumored to be sniffing around for a hostile takeover. He greeted Anthony with a thin smile. "Quite a show," he said. "Congratulations on your heartfelt confession. Your stock's plummeting, by the way." Anthony glared, refusing to dignify the provocation with a response. Instead, he brushed past the rival and headed for the exit. Bodyguards and a personal driver escorted him through a side door to avoid the media throng, though a few swift paparazzi still managed to snap fleeting shots of him stepping into the car. En route to the hospital, Anthony made a quick phone call to his legal advisor, who reported that the blackmailer had gone silent for the moment. "Maybe your confession took the wind out of their sails," the advisor suggested. "Let's hope," Anthony muttered, though he doubted it would be that simple. "If they come back, I won't pay a cent." His hands trembled slightly as he pocketed the phone. A swirl of conflicting emotions flooded him: relief at telling the truth, dread at the board's impending decision, and worry for Ava. In the hush of the car's back seat, he stared out at the city lights, wishing for a moment of peace that never seemed to come. When Anthony arrived at the hospital, he found a cluster of reporters outside yet again, though the staff kept them at bay. Security guided him through an alternate entrance. He hurried up a quiet hallway until he reached Ava's room. She was watching a replay of the press conference on TV, her face somber. When she saw him, she muted the broadcast. "That was brave," she said softly, though the lines of worry across her brow hinted at lingering concerns. He took a seat beside her. "It had to be done," he murmured, covering her hand with his. "I'm sorry you had to hear about our lives in front of the whole world, but—" She shook her head, tears welling up. "You did it to protect us, to stop living in fear of what could be used against you. I'm proud of you." Her voice cracked on the last words, revealing the strain. Touched, Anthony leaned in to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. The heart monitor next to Ava beeped steadily, a small reminder that her condition was still precarious. He stroked her cheek, trying to project a calm he didn't fully feel. They sat there in fragile togetherness until a phone rang on the bedside table. a private line set up by the hospital for essential calls. Ava lifted the receiver, listened, then handed it to Anthony. Her expression said it all. More trouble was brewing. He pressed the phone to his ear, bracing himself. A board member's voice trembled at the other end, explaining in clipped sentences that the company's top investors were preparing an immediate vote of no confidence. "Unless you present a viable plan to salvage our stock and reassure partners, they'll have no choice but to remove you," she said, quietly grim. Anthony closed his eyes, exhaustion nearly overwhelming him. He offered a terse thanks and ended the call. Ava watched him struggle to contain a surge of frustration. "Go," she urged gently. "I'll be here, but you need to face them." He wanted to protest, worried about leaving her side, but the look in her eyes told him there was no alternative. She believed in him, that he could both fight for the company and fight for their future as a family. Just as he rose to go, the phone rang again. This time the voice on the line was the last one he wanted to hear, his old rival, the one who had dogged him with pointed remarks. The man spoke with a self-satisfied drawl, demanding a meeting in private. "I have information that could change the vote," he said. "Meet me, and we'll talk terms." Anthony's face went pale, heart pounding. The blackmailer had gone silent, but a new threat was taking shape, one that might twist the board's no-confidence vote to the rival's advantage. He hung up slowly, dread settling like a lead weight in his chest. Ava watched him with wide eyes. "Who was it?" she whispered, already sensing the answer wouldn't be good news. He set the phone down, voice tight. "The rival behind everything, demanding we talk, right when the board might oust me." A chill passed between them, the hospital monitor's steady beeps underscoring the sudden tension. The final stand loomed. Anthony would have to confront the very person who seemed intent on tearing down his entire world. The board summons Anthony. With the final vote hours away, the phone rings again. It's the rival who orchestrated the blackmail, demanding a meeting in secret. Anthony stood on the curb of an unremarkable side street, the city's early morning bustle already humming in the background. Thin shafts of sunlight slipped between tall buildings, illuminating specks of dust in the air. His breath felt shallow, every step forward weighted with the knowledge that the future of his company, and possibly his entire life, hung in the balance. This was the address the rival had demanded they meet, a small cafe nestled in a gritty block where neon signs flickered above half-graffitied walls. He checked his phone once more. The board's vote of no confidence was scheduled for midday, just a few hours away. Ava was still at the hospital, stable but exhausted, her hope pinned on him finding a solution. He squared his shoulders, inhaling the faint aroma of roasted coffee drifting from the cafe's interior, and pushed open the door. Inside, the lighting was dim, the decor modest, simple tables, an espresso machine hissing behind the counter. Only a few patrons lingered, hunched over pastries or phone screens. In a corner booth, Anthony's old rival, tall, impeccably dressed, and wearing the smirk of a man too comfortable with his own power, waited. A single empty cup rested in front of him, as if he'd been there for some time. "Walker," the man said, inclining his head in a half-nod. "I appreciate your promptness. It would be a shame if you missed your own board meeting." Anthony slid into the seat across from him. "You're the one who insisted we talk in person," he replied, keeping his tone guarded. The cafe's low murmur made their conversation feel oddly intimate. The rival leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I've orchestrated a few revelations about your past dealings and about your personal life that have caused quite the stir. You're hemorrhaging public goodwill and investor confidence." Anthony bristled, but forced himself to remain calm. "You admitted to blackmailing me before. Why the charade now?" A faint chuckle. "Call it a business opportunity. I never planned to let you sink completely. You have talent, but your downfall would help me swoop in and control a slice of that empire. I'd prefer if we made this simpler. You step aside, quietly hand me a share of the company. In return, all these damning leaks disappear. Outside, a scooter roared by, muffled behind the cafe's glass. Anthony exhaled slowly. And if I refuse? The rival's eyes hardened. Then I release everything I have. More documents, personal details about Ava, speculation about the babies. You'll face lawsuits, a destroyed reputation, and the board will oust you. You'll be alone in the fallout, silence stretched between them. Anthony thought of Ava lying in that hospital bed, the twins' health on a knife's edge, the swirl of cameras stalking them at every turn. Then he remembered how coming clean about the old scandal had lifted a burden. "I'm not paying you a cent," he said quietly. "I won't be manipulated anymore." The rival snorted. Noble, but misguided. A voice cut in from behind them. "Misguided is thinking you'd get away with this." Both men turned. Anthony's legal advisor stood there, phone in hand, poised to record. And behind her, a longtime board ally, an older man who had once mentored Anthony when he'd first launched the company, hovered, arms folded, unwavering. "Did you really think we wouldn't figure out you orchestrated those leaks?" the advisor said, tapping her screen. "We have digital traces linking you to the blackmailer's messages, emails, bank transfers, enough to prove extortion and sabotage of a publicly traded company." The rival's gaze flickered with alarm, but he masked it with a tight smile. "You have no authority to make arrests," he scoffed. "What are you going to do? Blast my face on the news?" The mentor stepped in. "We're presenting this evidence to the board at the emergency meeting. We'll let them decide if they want a criminal investigation. You can either walk away quietly or face official charges. Your choice." For a moment, fury flashed across the rival's features. The two men locked eyes in silent battle. Eventually, he snatched his jacket from the seat beside him. "This isn't over," he spat, "but you've bought yourself time." He shoved past them and stalked out into the morning light, leaving the cafe door clattering in his wake. Anthony let out a shaky breath, relief and lingering adrenaline coursing through him. The legal advisor patted the phone in her hand. "We have enough. Let's get to that board meeting." The tension in the boardroom was palpable. Thick carpet muted the shuffling of feet, and anxious conversation hummed around the long mahogany table. Directors peered at documents, typed fervently on laptops or whispered in clusters. Anthony's old mentor stood at the front, hooking up a laptop to a projector. As soon as Anthony, his advisor, and their ally entered, the room quieted. The chairman, expression grim, gestured for them to proceed. Anthony held up a folder. "We have evidence that the scandal plaguing us was orchestrated by a rival with an interest in destabilizing the company. They've planted stories, blackmailed me, and threatened Ava. My legal team and I can prove it." A hush fell as the projector screen flickered to life. Emails, timestamps, digital footprints linking the unnamed rival to the blackmail messages. A few board members exchanged stunned looks. Some rubbed their foreheads in embarrassment, realizing they had seriously considered forcing out the very CEO who'd been victimized. Finally, someone cleared their throat. "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" Anthony fixed them with a weary glance. "I only gathered complete evidence within the last few hours. Until then, I was guessing, and that wouldn't have stood up to scrutiny. I chose honesty by publicly admitting my past missteps, and I plan to face the consequences. But I won't stand by while someone else capitalizes on that and tears us apart." Low murmurs passed around the table, some in agreement, others uncertain. The chairman folded his hands, exhaling. "This changes things, but it doesn't erase the concerns about the old deal or the scandal around your personal life. We still need to vote on your leadership." "I understand," Anthony said calmly. "I'm not here to dodge responsibility. I'm here to ask for a chance to prove my loyalty to this company, to rectify my mistakes, and to protect its future." The room erupted in debate. Some directors voiced support, lauding Anthony's transparency and decisive action against the blackmail. Others fretted over the damage already done, questioning whether public trust could ever be fully restored. Tension peaked when the chairman finally called for the vote of no confidence, either to reaffirm Anthony's position or remove him altogether. Pins and needles anticipation filled the air as each board member cast their vote. Anthony's throat felt tight. He glanced at his advisor, who gave a subtle nod of solidarity. His mentor, standing at the back, offered an encouraging half-smile. One by one, the ballots were tallied. A hush descended as the chairman tallied the final count, each second stretching unbearably. With a solemn face, the chairman stood. "The board has decided," he announced, voice cracking with relief or perhaps lingering doubt. "Anthony Walker will remain as CEO, on the condition that he lead a transparent restructuring to address any ethical failings. The motion to remove him fails by a narrow margin." A wave of exhaled tension rippled around the table. Some directors wore relieved expressions, others stiffly resigned to the outcome. Anthony's head lowered, a blend of gratitude and profound exhaustion washing over him. He offered quiet thanks, then slipped out into the hallway with his advisor at his side. They passed employees who'd gathered, worried, near the boardroom doors. Upon seeing Anthony's relieved expression, a few broke into tentative smiles, as though a collective breath had finally been released. But Anthony had no time for celebrations. He checked his phone. No new messages from Ava. He needed to get back to her. As he arrived at the hospital, he found Ava alert, propped up with an extra pillow. Sunlight spilled through the window, painting the white sheets in gentle gold. She glanced up, eyes filled with anxious hope. "Well?" she murmured. He let out a slow breath, dropping into the chair at her bedside. "They let me stay. We found who was behind the blackmail. He's out of the picture for now." His hand slid to hers. "We're not entirely out of the woods, but the worst of it might be over." The relief on Ava's face was immediate. Her shoulders sagged and tears sprang to her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. "I was so worried you'd lose everything, the company, your reputation, and that the stress might tear us apart." Anthony squeezed her hand, leaning in. "We still have work ahead. The board wants me to reform certain processes, prove the company can uphold ethics. But I'll do it. I'll do anything to ensure our future is solid." She pressed a trembling smile. "I believe you." She shifted, placing his hand gently on her belly. A soft flutter resonated under his palm, like the twins recognized his touch. His eyes shone with quiet wonder, remembering what truly mattered beneath the corporate chaos. Soon after, a nurse arrived with discharge papers and a slew of medical advice, hinting that if Ava continued to rest properly, she could recover at home. The doctor's final warnings echoed through the room: low stress, follow-up appointments, and consistent checkups. She and Anthony listened intently, hands clasped. Hours later, as they walked out the hospital's main doors, cameras flashed. Journalists hurled questions about the board meeting and the health of Ava and the babies. Security flanked them, steering them toward a waiting car. Ava clung to Anthony's arm, unsettled by the sudden glare of attention, but he pressed a protective hand against her back. They slipped into the car, and as it pulled away, the frenzy receded. Ava sank into the seat, breathing shakily. Anthony reached across, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know it's not going to be simple," he said, gazing at her with a mix of tenderness and resolve. "But from here on out, we're a team, at work and at home." Back at company headquarters later that afternoon, Anthony introduced Ava to a small group of key department heads. Some staffers seemed hesitant at first, but after he announced that Ava would be stepping into a new, elevated role, one leveraging her skills and dedication, a few began to clap. Quietly at first, then with genuine support. It wasn't a grand, triumphant moment, but it was real, a slow-building acceptance that suggested maybe, just maybe, people were ready to move forward together. When the meeting ended, they strolled through the building's lobby. Outside, a fresh wave of reporters waited, cameras at the ready. Ava braced herself, one hand protectively across her stomach. Anthony stepped close, offering a soft smile meant only for her. Without fanfare, they exited. Flashbulbs popped, voices called their names, but for a moment, time felt suspended. Anthony and Ava shared a private look, warmth sparking between them, a promise of better days. He leaned in and whispered, "We're in this together," sealing that vow against the roar of cameras, leaving them both with a sense of hope for what lay ahead. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.